So welcome, everyone. It is truly my privilege to welcome you to what I can assure you will be an energizing and inspirational discussion on women's leadership, equity, and really upward mobility for all. Our theme today is When Women Lead, Strategies to Advance Equity. This is a special celebration of Women's History Month. Thank you so much to the Mineta Transportation Institute for hosting this event, along with COMTO and WTS in San Francisco. So we're going to have a conversation with some phenomenal women transportation leaders who represent multiple disciplines, modes, and sectors across academia, the public and private industries, and nonprofit sectors. They're going to share with you their personal stories and some lessons learned along the way. My name is April Rai. I am the president and CEO of the Conference of Minority Transportation Officials, and it is my privilege to be your moderator today. I am going to turn it over to a representative from WTS San Francisco, Jasmine Mejia, who is going to give us some words from our sponsor.
I am Jasmine Mejia, the WTS San Francisco Bay Area Chapter President. We are proud to partner with the Mineta Transportation Institute and the Conference of Minority Transportation Officials to celebrate Women's History Month. WTS International was founded in 1977 by a group of pioneering women that were discouraged from participating in professional associations unless the activities were deemed educational. The group of women organized luncheons, workshops, and seminars. The original members supported one another, used their connections to advance their careers, and began to create a more diverse and equitable industry. The mission of WTS is to attract, sustain, connect, and advance women's careers to strengthen the transportation industry. We offer scholarships to high school, college, and graduate school students. We provide opportunities for professional and leadership skills development through our Transportation U, mentorship, and women's leadership programs. Thank you for inviting me on today, April.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mejia. It is wonderful to see you again, and congratulations on becoming president of WTS San Francisco, an amazing chapter.
Thank you.
Today's event will be recorded, so no worries if you didn't catch everything or if you want to share it with a friend. This event will be recorded and made available. Now, we did have some questions submitted ahead of time, but if you have a burning question that comes up as we're having our discussion today, feel free to submit it through the chat or the Q&A feature. And I love the conversation that's happening in the chat right now, where you're saying where you're from and what's going on. So please continue that. It's nice to see the representation that we have across North America on this call. So today, we have some phenomenal female leaders that are going to be talking to us about their story. And I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves to you one by one. I'm going to start with Ms. Melissa Figueroa. She is the Chief of Strategic Communications for the California High-Speed Rail Authority. Melissa, please tell us about yourself and your journey into the transportation industry.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me here today. I am thrilled to be a part of this panel. When I was asked to join a couple of weeks ago, I put it in big bold print on my calendar, and I've been looking forward to it ever since. This is just such a phenomenal group of women, and I feel very privileged to be a part of this. So I have an interesting journey, as I know my colleagues here do as well, into the world of transportation. I actually began my career as a television news journalist. I went to school to be a journalist, and I served in that role for about 10 years in a couple of different television newsrooms in California. And ultimately, at the end of my tenure here at a station in Sacramento, I decided it was best for my husband at the time and I to try something different. We were talking about starting a family, and working overnight in a newsroom was just not conducive to that sort of life. So I started looking for jobs around Sacramento, and I wanted to continue the work of communicating to the public and providing helpful information to the public in meaningful ways. So I got into state government. And I worked as a communications and press secretary for a state senator in the legislature who had a phenomenal group of women that worked for him. And they still today serve as my mentors. And when that wonderful senator termed out, I was fortunate enough to be appointed by Jerry Brown and served 8 years under his administration in various agencies, the last 4 of which was at the California State Transportation Agency. And I had the privilege of working for CEO Brian Kelly, who's got a long history in transportation policy. And a couple of years ago, about 4 years ago, he brought me here to High Speed Rail. And I've been serving under the Newsom administration as an appointee ever since. And I just love transportation because it leaves a meaningful impact on the lives of Californians and the nation. And we are doing some really impressive work that impacts communities of all walks up and down the state of California. And I could not be prouder of that work.
That is amazing, Melissa. And it's comforting because I think a lot of us start our careers out thinking that it's going to be just a straight roadway. We know exactly where we're going. We know exactly what to do. It never is. I don't know anyone professionally who has a straight career journey. There's a little winding, but the winding is amazing. So thank you.
The winding is what makes it better because it makes you a better manager later and a better person later because you understand so many different organizations.
100%. And I love that, your impact that you have in your role is something that drives you. And I think that that's something we may hear throughout the discussion today. It absolutely drives me. Moving on to Dr. Karen Philbrick, Executive Director of the Mineta Transportation Institute and friend.
Yes.
Dr. Philbrick, can you tell us about your
so
transportation
much.
journey and more about your role?
I will do that, and I'm looking forward to it. So nice to see everybody today. So as April mentioned, I'm Executive Director of the Mineta Transportation Institute. We are a university transportation center that focuses on improving the mobility of people and goods, and we accomplish this through surface transportation research, workforce development, technology transfer, and education. At present, I lead 3 competitively selected multi-university consortia. The first, funded by the U.S. Department of Transportation, is the Mineta Consortium for Transportation Mobility, which include partners at Howard University, Navajo Tech University, and the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. I also lead the California State University Transportation Consortium, which is a collection of all 23 CSU campuses, incidentally, the largest 4-year public university in the nation, and I focus their surface transport, research, and workforce development. And then finally, funded through the Federal Railroad Administration, is the Climate Change and Extreme Events Training and Research Program. Now, April, you and Melissa both talked about our career paths not being linear in nature. And I am a testament to that as well. I fell into transportation and I fell in love. The way that happened, I'm a psychologist by training with a double master's and PhD in various disciplines. But the very first day of my doctoral program, and I know some of you have heard this, I had this little professor walk in and, kind of classic trailing papers, a little disheveled. And he just looked at the 6 of us, because there were 6 accepted in the program. And he said, who wants to travel and who wants to make extra money as a research assistant? So I was the only one that raised my hand. And 2 weeks later, I found myself in Richmond, Virginia at 3 a.m. in steel-toed boots, collecting data on locomotive engineers and conductors and looking at their sleep-wake patterns, as well as the response to trauma following grade crossing accidents or trespasser incidents. And then I went back to Denver and I was seeing patients at Denver General Hospital. And I know it sounds like I'm making it up, but I heard the sound of a freight whistle while I was doing therapy with someone who's mentally ill and chemically addicted. And in that moment, I had the greatest epiphany of my life. And I said, I belong in transportation. I can affect change on a much greater level, change the focus of my doctoral program, and I've been in it ever since, first as an active researcher and now as a leader. And I love it.
That is, I have heard that story before, but I could never hear it too many times. It's amazing. Fell into transportation and fell in love.
Fell in love.
What did we learn from this? Raise your hand and say yes. That's what you need to do. That's what Dr. Philbrick did.
Yes. And April, you remind me of the advice I always give students. It's say yes to opportunity, because you never know how serendipity will influence the trajectory of your life.
100%. And we often think we know what the next thing is, what the next step is. But I am a testament to, you may not know. So
Yeah.
you don't close your mind off to things that come your way, opportunities that come your way. It may land you in a dream job, like Dr. Philbrick. Excellent. Kim Slaughter, CEO of Sistra USA. Please, Kim, tell us about your story. How'd you land in transportation? We're all ears.
Well, hello to everyone. Yeah, I'm just, first of all, Karen, I'm surprised you were the only person who raised your hand. I'm like, yes, I'll do that. And then, so my story, I just started out on the circular path, right? I knew it was not going to be a straight path for me. What was driving me is I wanted to do something. I guess I jumped right in. Sorry, I'm Kimberly Slaughter, and I'm the CEO of Sistra USA. But I always wanted to do something that made a difference, right? I think you've heard that theme with everyone so far. I just wanted to make a difference in people's lives. Whatever I did, I wanted to feel like I'm leaving this earth having made a difference. I wasn't quite sure what that was going to look like. At the time, I actually thought I would do that by going to law school. But in my senior year of undergraduate, I needed to take one last course to fulfill my minor in psychology. Karen, we've got a lot in common, right? And so I took this course on social psychology. And I too raised my hand when the professor wanted 4 volunteers to work on a special project. That special project studied a community and the associated land use both within and surrounding that community, and what was the impact it had on the mental well-being of the persons living in that community, right? And the scenario basically was a low-income housing development with smokestacks from an industry in the background. And he said, what would it take for you to live in this place if you were a person who didn't need low-income housing, right? And so it put me in a position to think about, what is it that we take for granted? And at some point along the lines, we realized that transportation connected access to everything, to education, to jobs, to medical care, right? Health facilities, to peer entertainment, to just be exposed to a whole different way of life than you were in your own neighborhood, right? And so I took a year off to be a journalist for the Texas House of Representatives and figured it all out. And figured out that my path forward would be to go into community and regional planning, where I got my Master's of Science from the School of Architecture at the University of Texas at Austin in community and regional planning. And at the time, I took a position with what was Parsons, Brinckerhoff, Quaid, and Douglas back then, and 80% of their work was in transportation. And I took a path that allowed me to enjoy exposure to many different aspects of our industry, starting from being a travel demand forecaster to leading into doing financials for projects, understanding funding programs, developing the costs, doing environmental clearances, understanding the design needs, and taking the whole project through full project development, becoming a project director, then a program director, and thus all the way to today, over 35 years later, which is really scary to say. And now I am the first female CEO of a national engineering consulting firm that I've just been blown away by the opportunity. And it's been amazing for the last 2 years to work for Sistra. As I said, I head up our US operations. We are an international company headquartered out of Paris, France, with over 9,000 employees. And every day our employees are working with our clients to develop transportation solutions that not only solve today's problems, but are actively looking ahead to address tomorrow's problems as well.
Woo. First of all, we are in the presence of greatness. I bow. Amazing. I think I love hearing your story, Kim, because I feel like All of our education and our experiences, it will positively inform our careers. Even if it doesn't turn out exactly what we think it is, when we're experienced, all of that informs your work, and I'm sure contributes to your ability to execute your role as a CEO of a major A&E firm.
Yes.
So thank you so much for being here with us today. You make me smile. On to our last but absolutely not least panelist, Linda Tran, who serves as Director of Public Engagement and Senior Advisor at the U.S. Department of Transportation. Linda, welcome. Tell us about you, your role, and how you landed in transportation.
Oh, April, you left me to be last, which means, I can never measure up to these amazing women that are on the screen with me. So as April said, I am Senior Advisor to Secretary Pete and Director of Public Engagement. It's really fun to see some of the introductions that are happening in the chat here, because many of you have hosted us as we have run around the country for the last 2 years. So I'm especially grateful to have you all listening to us telling our personal stories here. My title is big and long, and, you can define it however you want to. The way I define it is it means I'm an organizer. I have been an organizer my entire career. I started as a political organizer, too many years ago now to cite here, and I've done it across politics. I've done it across policy and advocacy. I've done it since before Barack Obama made it cool in 2008, and it is something that is, really ingrained in my blood. I'm also the daughter of immigrants. I always want to make sure that people have that little tidbit about me, because it has definitely defined who I am, how I see the world, how I approach challenges. And as it turns out, my parents were also organizers in Vietnam when they were protesting all kinds of interesting things in the mother country many, many years ago. So it's really been in my blood. In this tour of duty at DOT, this is actually my second time around. I also served at DOT during the Obama administration. It has been my great honor and privilege to both help pass major pieces of legislation like the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, but also to make sure that once that legislation it becomes law, once the resources start flowing, that we get to hear from people like all of the women leaders that are here on this call, but also all of you that are tuning in from around the country, so that we make sure that we're not only incorporating your perspectives and your lived experience into the policies as we write them, but that we're continuing to get that feedback loop, that intel, so that we can ensure that we are iterating and making things better as time goes on. I was wooed back to DOT this go around by the secretary. Not surprisingly, he's a very compelling person, but specifically his pitch about this moment, this generational opportunity, this once in a lifetime chance to right racial injustices, generational issues that have literally been built into our roadways. So I feel that mission, and I know my colleagues do, every single day. We try to ground all of the policies and programs that we are churning out here in equity and accessibility and this greater sense of wanting to make the world a better place. It has driven everything I've ever done. I feel like I've lived a million different lives before coming back to DOT. Just before this, I was advising Bill Gates and Breakthrough Energy and scaling their organization and turning it from what was essentially a series of venture capital funds into the advocacy and broader policy behemoth that it has become today. I was also a consultant for a great number of years, working with a range of different clients, everything from doing criminal justice reform and anti-poverty work to working with billion-dollar consumer packaged goods companies, so doing the whole scale of things. And then I did a lot of political consulting. I also had the really kind of fun, unexpected side adventure. I'm hearing my fellow panelists here talking about journalism. I also had the opportunity to be a political commentator with CBS News for almost 6 years through a number of different cycles, and just traveling around the country doing spin rooms and having the opportunity to react to this crazy world that we've been living in for the last too many years now. But I'm really grateful to be here. I'm really grateful to you, April, in particular, for continuing to see me. I love it.
Ma'am, let me tell you what, I need to take a step back, and I need to say, it is not a coincidence that Dr. Karen Philbrick, Kimberly Slaughter, and Linda Tran are current and previous women who move the nation from COMTO. They have been recognized for that. Melissa, we're coming for you. The point is,
I look forward to it.
phenomenal women. And Linda tried to make me cry this past Wednesday with her speech. She was accepting for Celebrate. She's trying to do it again. We're going to try to not do that. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, Linda, especially being a daughter of immigrants and just seizing the opportunities, the moments, and connecting with the mission of the organizations that you serve. I think it's a really strong point. I just wanted to share quickly a little bit of my story before we move on to some of our framing questions. Thank you to the Mineta Transportation Institute for spotlighting some of that in a post earlier this month. You know, I actually started my career as a sign language interpreter. I learned sign language in high school and I kind of grabbed onto it and loved it. It's an expressive language. I'm all about the expression. It allowed me to connect with a community that is often forgotten, the deaf community. And I loved that. I loved doing work that made me feel good and made me feel like I was positively impacting my community. So I did that for some time. I interpreted in the state of California for deaf ones who needed interpreting at their doctor's appointments and their law appointments. And that felt great. And after a while, I felt like maybe I could do more. And it's a strange feeling that sometimes we have. And I had the opportunity to move to Washington, D.C. and do some work for an advocacy firm. So I did that for almost 7 years. I came to DC, it was over 20 years ago, don't do the math. And that's how I started my career in Washington, DC. And after a while, I didn't feel like I connected with the mission of that lobby shop. I felt like some of the things we lobbied for did not match my personal values. So I left that firm, went to work for the University of Maryland. And in that role, I served the dean on advocacy initiatives in the School of Nursing. And I was put on a project with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation for the state of Maryland. And really, it was designed to look at building healthier communities, thriving communities, health equity, and the synergies there were so clear that there was an intersection between transportation and health equity. Mm-hmm. That changed my life. And it was all centered on research. So it's not crazy that I would be a board member of the Mineta Transportation Institute now, because it's a large part of why I have a career in transportation now. My ability to do work that even in a tiny way contributes to society as a whole inspires me. So that's an important thing that I have to have as a part of my roles wherever I go. So with that, let's dive into some of these questions. And one of the questions that I wanted to address to you all is, why is it important that we have women leaders? Why do we need diverse voices at the table to further our transportation goals locally, nationally, and globally? Melissa, can you start us off?
Sure. I want to echo a little bit of what Linda was saying. When you are the daughter of immigrants, you have a different perspective on life. And I think it's a wonderful perspective to have. It gives you an appreciation and an understanding for perhaps an upbringing that you were not part of, because your parents have made an attempt to have a better life for you. So you want to pay that forward. And how are you going to do that in a meaningful way? So perspective matters. Having a voice at the table matters. Having a female voice at the table matters, because I know when I walk into a room, I am a mom of 3, first and foremost. So I'm going to look at things from a different lens than my early 20s counterpart that has no kids and is living the glorious single life and has a different idea on what they need out of a transportation system than what I need out of a transportation system versus what my parents need out of a transportation system. All those voices matter. And when you layer on the female complexity to it, because we think things through a little bit differently, let's be real, that matters, and those voices matter. But what we need to do as female leaders in this world and in this industry is make sure that we speak up and we have that voice. We don't keep it to ourselves. We don't keep those opinions to ourselves as we're sitting in this predominantly male, field. We speak up and say, hey, hold on, have we thought about it this way? Have we thought about the impacts to this community? Have we thought about the impacts to that mom, the single mom who doesn't have access to a car? Have we thought about the non-English speaking family and how they're going to be able to read the signage to get to point A to point B? These are perspectives that are important and necessary if we want to be successful in this area. And I think that we as women have a very interesting way of communicating that. And I love it, because I It's just a fun conversation to have and a fun perspective to have. And when you get men folded into the conversation going, oh, I hadn't thought of that, you feel very fulfilled in speaking up.
So true. How we utilize transportation systems is absolutely affected by our day-to-day circumstances, which are different.
Different.
Absolutely. Dr. Philbick, what would you say with regard to the importance of diverse voices at the table?
I would say ditto to what Melissa just said, because that was such a comprehensive response. But what I would add to that is, if we're looking at business, oftentimes we want to look at the bottom line and return on investment. And if you look at the landscape of Fortune 500 companies, you see that 15% are led by females. And those organizations that have broader representation on their board and in their leadership ranks of women actually outperform the other organizations in terms of profitability. And it is in large part dictated on that extra voice we bring. We focus on communal goals more than personal goals. We make sure that everybody is heard around that table and that everybody's experience is considered when we roll out policies and implement change. And I think that's critically important.
Thank you so much, Dr. Philbick, for bringing up the business case for diversity, because honestly, I've been in a lot of rooms, and before I start my remarks, I have this. This is what I'm looking at.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. What was that?
Right? But when you make the business case and you connect it to the ROI, well, those hands come down because everybody cares about that. So thank you for sharing that. Tim, what would you add to that on the importance of diverse voices at the table?
Yeah, no, I think both the ladies have done such a great job of setting that up. And I would say that those Fortune 500 companies, or any companies that have more diverse representation, not only at the board level, but throughout the entire organization, from the C-suite to first day in the door, right? Yep. You know, to the support services. I guarantee those companies have a better understanding of the markets in which that they serve, and you know, their client base, and how to deliver to those markets and clients. It is so important that we do not. I mean, if you want to be able to sit here and say that your market, your client base is all homogeneous, then fine. Your homogeneous workforce will meet that need, right? But I don't think that we could be able to find any company, or the most companies, that are able to say that. And so the diversity has repeatedly shown itself to have a return that far exceeds anything we ever imagined. Although, you know, one of the other things I wanted to touch bases on is that ladies talked about being the different voice in the room. You know, I had the great fortune. I'm not a child of immigrants, but I'm a child of African-American parents who drove it home that, look, you're going to be hit with many challenges every single day of your life. People are always going to tell you you're not good enough and you aren't able to make it. But you need to stay true to who you are in your core, and don't let other people define you. And when you get in a room, speak up in the room and bring your whole self to that room. And that's what I've tried to do. You know, you think about women, people from different cultures, people who of different religions, whatever that difference may be, even the physical capability differences, we all bring different perspectives to the table and see how to deliver whatever our widget is from a different perspective. And once you put all those together, we get a better product, period, end of sentence.
Yep. Kim, 100% true. Okay, Linda, I want you to tell us your thoughts about why it's important to have diverse voices at the table, but I'm also going to have you lead us into our second question. If you have any thoughts about approaches to advancing equity, either on an agency level or an individual level, have you seen anything that's worked well, in addition to your thoughts about the importance of diverse voices at the table, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think these women all said it very well and have been building on each other's comments. I mean, I guess the one thing I would add is kind of a personal piece of it, right? I mean, I'm also a mother of three, Melissa. I didn't know that.
Hey, there we go.
I also share. And my daughter is 12 years old, and she watches everything I say and do very, very closely, and have had the good fortune of getting to hear her say things that I've done that she's proud of. The thing is, my 9-year-old son and my 5-year-old son also watch everything I do, the opportunities that are available to me, and the kind of microphone that I have as an individual. And I feel like they see the world in a dramatically different way. They see it as everything is within reach for women. And thank goodness for them that they get to have that experience, because I don't even know most of you very well, but I guarantee you that we have had the same experience of being the only woman in the room. We've had the same experience of being the woman in the room who dared to say what she had to say and then later was reprimanded by somebody else in the room who didn't like the fact that we were speaking up, right? I mean, we have a lot of work to do. It is so inspiring to hear your story, Kimberly, in particular. You're working in a man's world and we all know it. And you are trailblazing in a way that is going to have a lasting impact, right? Because if you don't see it, you can't ever imagine that it's a possibility. So that, to me, just on the personal basis, I think is really important. It defines the next generation to see those voices and have those voices in the room. Bigger picture, I would say, it's part of the reason I came back to DOT. Like I said, right, if you don't define what it means to have equity, you're never going to get there. And, it's one of the things that I'm so proud of that this team has done is we released the only equity action plan that this department has ever had. Right. And it is very comprehensive in terms of the key performance indicators that we're trying to achieve, what we mean when we're saying equity, all of the different sectors that are impacted by the work that we're doing. And, it's a big picture vision that is very aspirational in some ways, but obviously also very achievable. And the whole point really is that if you don't set the targets for where you want to go, there's not really a way for us to get there. And that is how we've been thinking about it, not only at DOT, but across the administration. So DOT has its equity action plan, and there were 45 other agencies that also have equity action plans, because this president decided on day one that this was going to be a priority for his team and for this government. So it's something that we think about every day. It's not lip service for us, right? And something that I'm super proud just to see colleagues across the administration really invested in. The one other little anecdote I would just share is that, yes, we did this thing, we rolled out these documents, we're doing this work, we make sure that it's a part of the conversation, but it also was clearly a very empowering set of actions and a very empowering moment for so many people across the department. So the average tenure of career staff here at the Department of Transportation is 16 years. Wow. And I'm always blown away by the people I meet on a regular basis who've been here 25 years, 35 years, 45 years, right? And beyond, because people who work in transportation, as Dr. Philbrick said, they love it, so they stay in it. And the fact that we were centering our work on equity made so many people sit up and just get more excited and feel like they were seen. This is why I keep talking about being seen, April, because a lot of people need it.
So true. And I love your earlier comment about, making sure that the next generation sees a new narrative. It's so important. And thank you for bringing up the Equity Action Plan, because those definitions are extremely important. I speak in many circles, and oftentimes I have to start by just defining what equity means. Right. It's not equality, not everybody getting the exact same thing.
That's right.
It's giving people what they need based on their needs and circumstances. And, I know equity, diversity, and inclusion are buzzwords, but we have to step back and define those things clearly so that people know how to move them forward. Dr. Philbrick, what would you say about approaches to advancing equity that you've seen that could have a lasting impact?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I want to swoon because you and Linda have both touched on the power of data. So having data is critically important to understand where change needs to be implemented. But I want to talk first at the macro level. Let's think about legislation and different policies. So in 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed. Prior to that time, mass transit did not need to be accessible to persons in wheelchairs. And when I think about that legislation, I think about our founder, Secretary Norman Y. Mineta, who wanted to understand the challenges that persons with disabilities had. So you know what he did? He put himself in a wheelchair and had himself traverse the streets and the transportation system so he could firsthand understand what that felt like. But of course, he always had the grace of being able to stand up and walk. And that participation and that experience really led him to fight for equity and justice for all people. And then when we drill down a little bit, I'm very proud to say that of my full-time team, we are actually 100% female. It's not by design, it's because we hired the best people to do the job well. And those voices are so powerful. And when you give people the chance to really exercise their own vision, you're lifting them up and you're expanding the reach of your organization. And we had kind of touched on, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And we need to be that scaffolding for the next generation so they can see what's possible. Right now, the biggest crisis we're facing in transportation is the workforce shortage. Only 15% of the current workforce is female. Thank you to researcher Jody Godfrey for that MTI statistic. And we need to be reaching down in the K through 12 sector and beyond to help these kids see what's possible with good family supporting benefited jobs. I think when we're talking about interviews, just changing the language, really reviewing any job description to eliminate any gender biased language or any requirements that aren't valid. Do you really need to be able to lift a 40-pound box if you're doing administration? Probably not. And then also never, ever, ever have an interview panel that's all male. Make sure that there's diversity among that panel, which will make others feel like their voice is represented and can be heard. So I think there's things we could do at the micro and the macro level.
Ooh, you dropped some, in the chat, somebody said, preach. So I think that's the perfect comment for everything that you guys have said. I feel absolutely inspired. Data is important. Empathy is important.
Oh, yeah.
And, as you stated, Dr. Philbert, what gets measured gets managed. So it's something that we need to keep in mind, and taking a look at the tangibles, looking at those job descriptions is so important. Okay, I'm going to move us into a couple of the pre-submitted questions because they were so good. I want to make sure we get to a couple. So Kim, can I ask you any thoughts you have with regard to a question that was submitted saying that similar behaviors are positively attributed to men, like being assertive, and negatively attributed to women, like being aggressive? How can we address this? What can we say? What do we do besides just slapping them? What do we do? What do we say? How would you address this?
Well, so I would never advocate for assault. But
This is being recorded. You're
don't let it be said that I encouraged anyone in that direction. No. But, the sad truth is that this happens every single day. And even today in 2023, right? If a female speaks up and raises some concerns about something, then, and I will tell you, I've lived these comments. I'll just use personal examples. I've raised topics before to a male boss, and I was told that I was being emotional, and not focused on the business aspects of things. Right. But it was just an excuse, right? Or if two men were in a heated conversation about something. In fact, I've worked at companies where it's always been the statement, we can have healthy arguments with each other, but we're all still friends and colleagues at the end of the day. But it's okay to disagree with each other, but let it be a woman in that disagreement, right? That woman is just angry, emotional. She must be going through some calendar cycle in her life, whatever it may be. It is the most ridiculous things. Why women can't be passionate about a topic. Women can't have insight and opinions that we vehemently want to raise and present in a respectful, debatable manner, the same way men would do. I mean, this one is a hard one because I don't even know how we stop this other than starting right from the beginning with our children and allowing them to have diverse playmates, right? And and allowing them to resolve some of their conflict with each other, right? I mean, because so many things, you think about, some of these things have been socialized into us. So we think only boys can play with boys and girls play with girls, and so if you're not playing with each other, you don't necessarily know how to resolve things with each other. And whatever you're told about the other group, that's what you think is true about the other group and how you address it. So my thought is, I mean, we have got to be very conscious about it. The same way we are telling our kids how from the very beginning they should be interested in different educational pursuits and disciplines. We need to encourage them to work together, play, co-ed baseball, softball, soccer, whatever it may be, jump rope, and it's okay for boys to wear pink. I mean, it's breaking down these mental barriers that we want to put up that make us misunderstand about each other, bottom line. But let me just say, we also need to recognize that there are individuals out there who are still very concerned about seeing their cheese moved. Remember the book, Who Moved My Cheese? They don't have the vision to see themselves beyond where they are today. So if their cheese is being moved and others are being able to compete for that cheese, they're concerned, they don't have enough confidence in themselves that they still have the ability to compete and be a part of the group and be a vital contributor. They think that their confidence is built in them being successful by only letting a limited number of people in the group. Does that make sense to everybody? But I don't believe that my greatness is defined by someone else being less than me. So.
April, there's a comment in the chat that if I could, it says that some of these comments are coming from women.
Absolutely.
And I think that right there is some of the crux of the issue. As women in this industry, we need to band together. We need to stick together because there are not enough of us. So if we're undercutting each other, that does not lead to success anywhere.
Not every woman was raised to believe in herself, Melissa,
So we got to lift each other up and be a team. With force, we can be a team to be reckoned with. So let's do it. But undercutting our colleagues, our female colleagues, is not helpful. It's not conducive to success. And it's just not a fun work environment to be in. But if we get together and we raise our voice together, there is so much power in that.
Yeah,
and so much success in it.
Do you remember a few years ago, I didn't mean to interrupt, Melissa, there was an article in the Washington Post about Valerie Jarrett's White House, where in every meeting where there were women in the room, the women had this unspoken rule where when somebody made a point, later another woman would circle back to it and say, that point that Valerie made, let me build on that. And then they kept reinforcing each other around the room. And this was their kind of invisible genius, right, in getting certain men that were in the room to stop taking credit for the ideas that we're putting into the room. In lives since then, we have exercised this on teams that I've had the opportunity to be on, and it has worked brilliantly well, right? Because to Melissa's point, when we lift each other up, when we back each other up, it makes everybody as a cohort stronger.
Yeah. Right. Can I just say that the most effective tool for me, though, in dealing with a situation when someone does that is calling them on it in a very professional manner. That's right. Is saying, I'm aware that may sound emotional to you, but here's why it's a great business decision, right? Or whatever it may be. Use their words, but then don't embrace it as that, and help educate them on what it really is, and let them know, I see what you're doing, but I don't accept it.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes it's managing up, which is hard to do.
Oh, yes. Dr. Philbrook, did you have a thought on that as well?
I did. I have two quick thoughts. One is I want to share one of my favorite quotes, and pardon the French here. It is, diplomacy is the art of telling someone to go to hell in such a way they ask directions. And I think that's to your point, Kim, about the words we use matter. And I think at the basis of all good relationships, professional, personal, is communication. Giving someone the respect of your eyes, your undivided attention, communicating with meaning, listening with intention, and not waiting for the other person's lips to stop moving so that you can say what you've been rehearsing. I think that's so important. And Kim, you talked about the power of disagreements and people learning how to communicate better with one another. One of the things I try to teach my little 10-year-old girl, Charlie, is you never attack someone for a personal characteristic.
Right.
If you're doing a behavior that makes you uncomfortable or you don't agree with, you address it in an objective way. You never leave someone feeling like they can't be better or they can't resolve it. Words matter.
It's so true. And I think what you all have stated is so powerful. We need to first recognize that it exists. These biases exist. Let's just recognize that. And as women and persons of color and persons from different ethnic backgrounds, we've had to deal with this from day one. It exists. But it's important to call it out. And if we don't start calling it out, it's never going to change. And then we have to stick to our guns. We have to say, I believe in this. What I stated was, as Kim brought out, here's the business case for it, whatever it may be. And then I would encourage everyone to connect with your allies. They do exist. They may not look like you. They may not be your same gender. They may not be your same age, but they are helping you. They want to help you. So connect with those allies. I know we're short on time here, so I want to give you all one more round robin to tell us, this is Women's History Month. This is the prime time for us to discuss women's empowerment, but we want to make sure that it's not just a one-stop shop. It's just a flash in the pan once a year. How do we continue to empower women's voices every day, even when it's not on the calendar? Melissa, give us your closing thoughts.
I think we have to, like I said, we have to lift each other up. We truly have to band together. And then we have to expect this. We have to expect that there are going to be and should be female leaders in every organization from the C-suite on down. And it's not, oh, you are the first fill in the blank title. You are just fill in the blank title because you are the best one for that job. And you know what? By God, there was 10 other female candidates in line for that position too. And that is common practice. But we only get to that point by strong mentorship, by encouraging our colleagues to seek positions in other organizations of leadership, even if it means they leave your team. And that's a sad moment because they're just wonderful members of your team. Encourage that, encourage career growth, encourage mentorship, and then just be a team. Reach out to colleagues around the country. We have so many women on this call and they're all in the chat, so active. I mean, we are all on LinkedIn. Let's just form the biggest band of sisterhood that you can possibly imagine.
I love that, Melissa. Thank you so much. Dr. Philbrick, what would you say about the importance of making sure women feel empowered all throughout the year?
Well, I think when we talk about empowerment, we need to think about 5 different constructs. That's political, social, economic, psychological, and educational. What are the barriers to women obtaining empowerment, and how do we systemically address those so there's no disincentives? I think we need to, when you talk about transportation, we did this amazing research study many years ago with our partners at Rutgers that looked at how returning veterans integrated back into society. And what we found was those located in close proximity to public transportation integrated better. We're able to find employment. We're able to get to the medical appointments that were necessary to make them healthy again. We're able to engage socially, which we all know is so inherently linked with well-being and longevity. And I think breaking down barriers is very important and making sure that women feel their self-worth. And a lot of that is found through champion and mentors. April, you said we need to look for allies that may not look like ourselves. 2 of my greatest allies are an 84-year-old white man and a 71-year-old man. But I also had Nuria Fernandez and Grace Kruniken. So I balanced it out and realizing that it's not enough just to mentor, but we need to take it a step beyond and champion. Make sure we're putting that female in the room with people who are hiring, not just telling them where to look, but creating opportunity for them to excel.
Ooh, powerful, powerful, powerful. Thank you so much, Dr. Philbrick. Linda, what would you say about making sure that we keep this front and center, women's leadership and empowerment all throughout the year?
Well, first of all, who wouldn't want FTA Administrator Nuria Fernandez being
Right.
If you can check that off your list, I highly recommend it. That's a good place to start. I mean, look, I think when I think about women's empowerment, I'm first thinking about us as individuals, right? You have to stop starting your sentences with sorry, but, or excuse me, but.
Yeah.
Just say the thing you came to say and own it. That's step one. Step two, though, is I think you have to make room for the other women in your life. This is part of the point that Melissa was making. I always say, leadership is line of succession. And if you build a team around you, especially the women that are around you, in a way that you create opportunities for them and that you ultimately lift right out of it, all of that stuff always comes back to you. And so I think you just live it. Women's empowerment is about yourself, but it's also about building it for those around you. And it always comes back to you.
So powerful. Thank you so much. No more sorry, but.
No more.
Yeah.
So many times have we done this. Kim, what would you say?
Yes, I'll touch on two things. And Linda, thought about what Linda said. That was powerful because I think I can say I'm sorry in about 4 different languages. it's sad, but, right. But one of the things that we need to do is to think long term, not to just solve this problem today or try to address it today, but to make sure that we are making generational changes so that it isn't so easily reversed when someone out there that thinks that we shouldn't be at the table can easily remove us from the table. So my point is to educate girls, young girls now about what the true educational opportunities are to be in our industry, right? And let's not tell them one thing. When you go in and tell them there's only vanilla ice cream available to be in this, and we want to let them know there's Rocky Road, there's pralines and cream. Whatever it is you want to be, you can do it in the transportation industry. But if we never tell them that, if they don't know it, if they don't see the possibilities, then they will never be it, right? They will take their skills and go somewhere else. And we need them for so many reasons. One, because the workforce is depleting, and we need to be more diverse at the table. Secondly, is that once we're educating people on that, we need to actually include them in the room and make them feel like they belong. I'll tell you a really quick anecdote. I had a former client and later boss who asked me one day as a young professional to come with him to a meeting. And I was like, why am I going to this meeting? I have no idea. What is it about, right? And I knew there were some political candidates in the room, kind of high level. And he goes, nope, I just want you to come with me. And I want you to sit in this chair in the room and never say a word. And I'm like, okay. So I go in, and later I understand there was a person who was running for mayor in the beloved city of Houston, who this man, he almost crawled out of his skin, but he became so obsessed with why I was in the room, right? And he finally had to say, why is she here? What is she doing here, right? What is she doing? And the point is my client brought me to the room as a Black female because he said that candidate had a bad reputation of saying stuff that should have never been said in the first place. And he says, I want to see if he's going to say it when you're sitting in the room and be able to confront him about it. And so I'm saying, put people in the room, put us all in the room together, and whatever you're brave enough to say it, and let's talk about it. That's the only way we're going to be able to work.
I have so many notes. It's out of control. I need to make this so I can read it better. Melissa, give us your last thoughts about women's empowerment.
It just has to happen every day, all the time. I mean, the fact that we're having this conversation today and the positive feedback that we're getting from folks that are listening in shows that this conversation needs to happen more. It shouldn't just be 1 month of the year. It should be every day, every month, every year. And the more we talk about it, the more commonplace it becomes. And then it's just everyday practice. And then we don't have to have these conversations with our young girls about making sure you speak up and watch how you say this so that you're not taken the wrong way. everyone needs to be treated equally, whether it's women, men. I mean, it doesn't matter. We just all are one people and we need to be respectful of each other.
Totally agree. I am so full with inspiration and nuggets of truth and wisdom. I want to thank my esteemed panelists. I want to thank the Mineta Transportation Institute. Alvarina, she's back there. She's phenomenal to help put this together. She's silent in the background like we women are sometimes, but she's
Don't ever leave me, Alvarina.
amazing. And I just want to remind us of some things that were said today. First of all, we need to lift one another up. We need to live the behavior that we desire. So each of us has a role to play in doing that. First of all, imposter syndrome has no place in any of our brains because your perspective is invaluable and it is unique. So if anybody has any little inklings of imposter syndrome, you need to just shut it down because you deserve to be where you are. Thank you, Dr. Philbrick, for talking about systematically addressing this issue. It's important that we do it that way so that it's long lasting, as Kim brought out. It needs to be not just us, but the folks that are coming up behind us need to be able to benefit from us systematically addressing women's empowerment. And no more sorry, but, okay, everybody, let's just resolve. We're not saying that anymore. I'm so sorry, but, or does that make sense? Yes, it makes sense. Don't ask anybody. Yes, it makes sense. You're amazing. Don't ask. Also, somebody brought up that we should have the biggest LinkedIn consortium of women who support one another. I love that. So anybody who you see on this call, LinkedIn them, friend them. Let's support one another. It doesn't take much. It's so easy. We can support one another in that way. And last but not least, somebody said that Tuesdays should be called Trailblazing Tuesdays. And I thank you so much. On that note, have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, April.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye, friends.